And then whilst you're pondering that, and a few other people are joining, I'll set the scene. So at PyDataLondon conference a month ago, I ran another of my executives at PyData session. So that's aimed at people who are leading teams, be they coming up to their first leadership or running several sets of teams or whatever, any leadership role, to discuss the problems faced by leaders. So not how do I do the best machine learning and what's the best visualization tool, but how do I run a team? How do I hire? How do I cope with leadership issues? We've done 6 of those now, 2 at the PyData Globals, the virtual events, and 3 at London and 1 separate. And over the years, the questions have been increasing in maturity, as quite clearly the role of data science, be it Python or other, the role of data science gets more and more mature in organizations. Hello, Raphael. Raphael, you've got 5 points to spend in the poll if you'd like to choose topics. It should be on your screen. And so having run that 6th event, I figure that there's more discussion to be done. And the biggest bit of feedback I got after that discussion, that was with 50 people in the room over an hour, with another hour's breakout session on this topic of team building. The biggest feedback I got was an hour wasn't enough, we need to do more. So this is the first of several more experiments that I'm running personally. And then if it feels like we've got something really interesting going on here, which I think we do, then I will be collaborating with NumFocus to do some kind of training, discussion, leadership event at a future conference. So if we've got everyone there, rather than having a 1 hour lightly scheduled event, why not turn it into something more structured, aimed at leaders? And we'll figure that out in the future. And this also couples with the Successful Data Science Projects course that I run, because I'm always looking to figure out which topics people need to learn more about. I'll be running one of those in a couple of months. Sophia, hello there. So Sophia, you've got 5 points to spend in the online, the poll that's running. Feel free to tick some questions. I think we see some top questions coming through there. So I'm not going to repeat the background for that because the rest of you don't want to hear it. Nick, hello there. Nick, you've got 5 ticks you could make if you want into the poll that's running on your screen. But in a minute, I'm just going to pick at least the first question to kick us off because we're 5 minutes in. So this is the first of a couple of these success calls. I hope you'll join me for the next one. This one focuses on teams and growth strategies, or growth for teams. So the very people-oriented look at success. I'll just check, does my audio sound okay? I've got a fan running in the background. Do you hear that? You're not fussed by it? Right, perfect, excellent. Say again?
It's all good.
Okay, all good. Excellent. Right, that's great. So this session's recorded, and I'll be sharing the recording after, and I'll share it onto my newsletter as well. So don't say anything on this call that you wouldn't want heard by possibly 1,500 other people if they listen to the recording. And the first time you speak, so we're going to make this super informal and flexible, but the first time you speak, please just say your name and the organization that you're in, so either the company name or your sector, to give a bit of context, and whether you're like tiny startup, 2 people in your team, or corporate with teams underneath you or whatever. Just give some context, because some of these answers are very context specific. Okay, looking at the poll, I can see that we have a couple of clear winners. The recording is running. I reckon we've got most of us in who's joining. So I see as top voted, I've got 2 with 7 points. How do we achieve a T-shaped team? So which deep areas have been most useful? Which areas of deep knowledge have been most useful to your team? And what processes or tools have people found useful for fostering a remote first team? And remote first came up a lot in the executives session at PyDataLondon as being a critical question, particularly for teams that had to go hybrid and then were going remote first. They just decided to go remote first. And so finding the right tools was important. So let's tackle those in order. we'll spend 5 or 10 minutes. We'll see how we go with discussion on how do we achieve T-shaped teams. So this is where we have individuals who have a broad general knowledge and then one area of deep expertise. So rather than just one area of deep expertise and no other shallow knowledge, probably people can write SQL and make some kind of report, and they happen to be brilliant at, I don't know, analysis or constructing efficient SQL queries or whatever it's going to be in that deeper area. And particularly, I think, what areas of deep knowledge have you found most useful in your team? And I suspect it won't simply be the latest, greatest deep learning technique, but it'll be quite an interesting selection of things. So who would like to go first? How do we achieve T-shaped teams? How have you achieved T-shaped teams? Or if you haven't achieved a T-shaped team, but you've achieved something else that has worked, share that too. That would be a very useful thing to start with. So who would like to kick off with an observation there?
Sure, I can go.
Anders, please.
So I actually find that, as you mentioned as well, that
could I ask you to introduce your name and which company you're at, or sector, big, small company?
Yes, so they're just going first. My name is Anders. I had the Python enablement team in Nordea Asset Management, around 1,000 people-ish inside of Nordea, which is some 20,000, 30,000. So I've actually found that the most important thing tends to be more on the software engineering side when it comes to T-shaping, that it's not that hard these days to write a decent model. It's really hard to put into production and monitor it and evolve it. But at the same time, I find that a lot of the data scientists, quote unquote, that's not the thing that they're interested in. Like, they're not interested in software engineering principles. So I have seen that something get turned off by having to learn more about Docker and Kubernetes and all these technologies. Yeah, I was wondering if any other people have had the same experience.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I'm Sophia Goldberg at Sky, so very large company. I work in INAI, Innovation AI. We work on personalization and recommendation services mainly within my team. Yeah, definitely. I think we find, yeah, like, you've got to find data scientists who want to work cross-functionally with engineering and not just build a silo, I think, of data science to be, in my experience at least, to be effective in then implementing those solutions in production and getting stuff shipped. I think, yeah, it's something I think I'm aware of in the hiring process as well. When you interview people, just seeing if they just care about modeling. I mean, it's good to be interested. Like, obviously, it depends what your problems are, but some require more cutting edge ML, some will require less. But I think it is good to be aware of how willing they're going to be to work cross-functionally as well. So the hiring process is a good place, and I think it's a cultural thing as well. If you make it exciting for people, they're going to be more interested in learning about different things beyond their initial specialized area. Be interested in what other people think as well. Yeah.
Can I just ask, Sophia, which deep skills did you find most useful in your teams?
Yeah. So I think it depends. So we hire for different roles. Our teams are mainly consistent of AWS engineers, so cloud engineers, and data scientists. And so a lot of the cloud services stuff you can learn on the job. We tend to do associate developer AWS courses in our teams. And on the data science side, Python modeling experience of, or, depending on the level that they're coming in at, interested in developing those skills and modeling. But yeah, definitely, cloud, if for more senior roles, like, obviously lots of experience on AWS cloud services are really important for us to productionize our models. basically. Those are the kind of two areas, I guess, within our teams.
Okay, and has anyone else faced that challenge of making these more core software engineering development skills a cool thing to learn, or have you tackled that in different ways? Because it is essential, right? Having being able to write code that is supportable, whether they deploy the code or whether they just write the code that somebody else will then handle, but they've handed over something that's easy to read and has some tests and has some documentation and isn't a bunch of jumbled notebooks in a folder. That is essential. So go on, and Imeric, I see your hand up. Maybe you'd like to go.
Yeah. So
and if you could introduce yourself, please, Imeric.
Yes, sorry. So Emmerich, I'm ML engineer at Channel 4. So Channel 4 is a 1,000 people organization, and we have like a data science team of 12 people with a couple of product in production. So one thing that I felt was quite interesting. So first of all, I recommend to my team the Clean Code book. Like I sort of repeat myself all the time. You have to go back to the book. You have to go back to the book. You have to go back to the book. And I think they are so tired of me saying it that eventually they just go through it. One exercise that I find was good at filtering people, especially senior, was a refactoring task. We give so our first task when we recruit people is a simple exercise where we write a couple of checks with pandas, and then the second one is to refactor the code. What we found is that junior data scientists really actually are super weak. But it's actually easier to get like a more junior person that is not very good at software engineering best practice, especially with Python, and to make them understand how important it is in order to build products that you can maintain and collaborate with, versus like the challenges that we face. So either we hire like super senior people, which are really good, really strong when it comes to software engineering best practice. Challenge that we face is like mid-level that have started develop like some sort of badish practice, and then like to correct them into like a better sort of behavior is sort of a challenge. So yeah, I mean, I saw myself recently say, you know what, I'd rather have like a super junior person that we sort of shape into what we want, but although it's not always possible. So yeah, what I'm trying to say is a refactoring task aligned with how you do your code review was a good thing for us.
So I'll give you a little bit of feedback there. I run a software engineering class. I'm not sure if I'm going to run it in a few months, but I've run it over the years. And when I run it, I focus on two things. One is refactoring. Hey, I've got a really bad notebook full of bad variable names and incoherent plots and lack of labels and blah, blah. Yeah. And look, it doesn't work top to bottom. You've got to actually rerun it and find where you've done a bad import and all the silly stuff that we see people do. And then how do we put tests around it? So how do you use Pandera to test your data frames? And then how do you test your function that it's calculating correctly? And I get to the end of it, and then I have people saying, Ian, I thought I was coming here to learn software engineering, and all you've really taught me is how to write tests and how to write code that somebody else could read. And we've done a code review exercise where we've learned to read some bad code and give constructive feedback. So, well, if you can't do those things, I don't really care about design patterns. And we do a little bit of design patterns, but I find it interesting that so many data scientists think that there's this glorious, easy other world of suddenly I just spin out some coherent cluster of compute devices that do logging and everything magically. And actually, if you can't write code with functions that make sense, then and you can't rely upon it, then it's all a bit silly. Yeah, I find that always an interesting one. Anders.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a little bit of context because we talked about it at the summit, but I know a lot of people aren't here. Because one of the ways that we maybe are a bit different is that we don't really work on data science projects. We work on streams or processes, and then some of them can be improved by data science, right? So you can have like, how do you most efficiently answer the customer, and then you can use machine learning to help with that. So when one of these value streams start up, you often have data science people assigned to the stream, and they're stuck in quotation marks doing very important value-adding work of doing SQL queries and doing heuristics and doing analysis to find some, quite large value gains, but they don't see it as data science. So it's just to toss that extra part into the my previous statements. And I don't know if anyone else works in the same way.
So it's a really interesting point about separating the cool data science work and that sexiest job of the 21st century title with, hey, we got some business value to add, and we happen to have some tools which might involve some maths, or they might not, to solve it. And this is still involved in this T-shaped question, because how do you encourage your team members not to do career CV driven development, but actually value development for the organization and doing the right job, not just the cool job? How do you encourage that deep knowledge, the right deep knowledge in your teams? Lorna, are you gingerly putting up a hand? And then Nick afterwards?
I actually wasn't, but I can check.
Okay, sorry. I just saw a hand creeping.
I was kind of having a bit of a thinking phase, but I'm happy to be volunteered. So hi everyone, Lorna. I work in a small team of which we are 3 data scientists, which I lead, and a data insights team of like 7 or 8 or so. So yeah, fairly small. I think we kind of have to work, given that we kind of have to work quite end to end, in that we deploy our own models, make our own tests to check our data quality and everything like that. So it's sort of part of the process. I feel like when we've had people on the team that have had a keen interest in like engineering and infrastructure, like our whole platform has definitely leveled up as a result. So when we've had those spikes, I've definitely seen the value of it. But for us, it's more of a necessity rather than an advantage for a lot of this stuff. I don't know, in terms of like your question of how to kind of like get the value and, how to show people that this is the best thing. I think, I mean, as much as possible, and there's something we've noticed as well, that it's like people, or at least people who I've managed, have always been really motivated by seeing the impact of your work. And especially given that we're a small company, and I think that's a lot of the reason that people will join a company like ours, is that you do a thing and then you also get to see that thing in use and in production, and the customer experience change as a result of your input. So, and I think like as much as possible, like tying it back to that, like being like, okay, look, yes, you've done this really great model, but we can't get it live unless, we can put the output here, or it runs in a certain amount of time, or whatever it is. And so, yeah, just like linking it back to kind of like the thing that really is motivating, which for us is, getting stuff live and seeing what we're doing actually take effect.
Great point. So yes, people who are motivated to make change, see it work. Yeah, that's I think that is incredibly important. And lots of data science teams don't end up taking things live because they don't work or they can't actually ship. It's such a big blocker in certain industries, just getting something live when you've done all the other work. So yeah, having people motivated by that and having control is it's wonderfully empowering. Nick, what's your observation? And introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Nick. Sure. So yeah, I'm Nick. I work at M&S, where we have just over 30 data scientists now. It would very much echo some of the points others have made. We tend to recruit people who have an aptitude and a willingness to learn and apply software engineering best practices, who are motivated by having impact. And we ask questions around to try and gauge that interview. I think I like the idea of having people aligned to kind of value streams and not necessarily tied into having to use ML. I think the reality of our business is we have a lot of specialist roles. We have separate analytics teams, we have separate data engineering teams, things like that. Most of our people are placed in areas where we believe ML is going to be needed. So for example, we have a series of teams where people are building recommender algorithms and things like that, or doing causal inference to drive efficiencies in marketing or markdown optimization, things like that. In those aspects, yeah, I think as others have said, we expect people to work end to end, even where there are specialities. and specialisms. So we do expect people to learn a bit about data engineering to help automate their pipelines, learn about cloud and testing and monitoring and logging. Sometimes doing analytics and doing experiment analysis, even if other times we have a different specialism who takes on that role. I think it creates a lot of learning opportunities for people, gets people collaborating where people don't necessarily have some of those skills to begin with. But yeah, it can be challenging for people as well sometimes.
Okay, so I'm going to make that's an interesting point you raise. We'll ask it in a bit about best practices for recruiting people. You mentioned looking for people who want to work end to end, and I wonder if there's a challenge in the market, but we'll get to that a few questions down the line. Let's move on to the next question. What processes or tools have people found useful for fostering a cohesive remote first team? So I've noted collaboration tools, tracking the work is happening, the presentation of results, whatever the tooling is, or whatever the processes are, checking in daily with team leads, whatever that might be. What have you found most important for hybrid or remote first, getting away from an office focused culture and tracking things online? Who would like to start off? Go on, Amrik.
So one thing that I found really useful for different reasons is a tool called Lucid Chart, so short intro, it's basically a tool that allows you to create, like, for example, a diagram, like architecture diagram, but also like pipeline diagram, but also brainstorm work. And it's incredibly well designed in terms of UX, super simple to learn. And you see what everyone is collaborating, like, so for the first time, I found, like, yeah, a visual tool that is just so easy to use in order to collaborate remotely, and it's super visual. So it's really the first time where I'm like, you know what, it does the same job as a Blackboard, if not better. So yeah, I don't know if anyone uses it, but Lucid Chart, I'm going to share the link. I really like it.
Please, yes, do share the link. And somebody earlier mentioned Clean Code. Was that you, Imeric?
Clean Code.
Clean Code, the book.
Yeah. It's a
so
book,
let me check. Is it the book by Martin? Agile Software.
Yes, Bob.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'll pass that into the chat as well in a moment. So I use Miro for some of that collaborative whiteboarding, which has worked really well for me. Anyone else? Tools and processes that work?
Yeah, I can say +1 for Miro back when I was able to use it. It was fantastic.
Who else might I volunteer to speak here? We haven't heard from Daniel or Barnaby or Raphael or Kevin yet. Any of you care to share a process or tool that has worked?
Still waiting for the best ideas.
Okay, you're collecting, fine. Well, and Teams has worked in our collaboration. It's not the most fluid tool, but it has worked well enough.
Yeah, so yeah, in general, I think going from just oral culture to a written culture, I think that's what has been the hardest. And yeah, Teams does the job. Like Slack, we don't have Slack, we have Teams, because we're using Microsoft, but yeah, it does the job, and it just kind of slowly trains everybody to write things down, have some threads where you can go back up to and look at the history. So anything that facilitates this written communication is good.
So another tool we're using, which I found quite helpful, especially when it comes to writing down some planning of the work we want to do, is Paper from Dropbox, paper.dropbox.com. And the reason why, so not only everyone collaborate, you can see what people have added, but you can comment, and it's just very smooth. So it's quite nice to collaborate. Like what we do usually is we would come up with some planning and then ask people to review it. And so I found it to be a good way to spot a flow in any kind of planning or design work that we do. The drawback is that they are by nature mutable, so it's not like Confluence where you have something that stay there. It's just change all the time. So it's a small like just a document, but that doesn't last in time. But it's a good way to get people to collaborate on a different time basis, I guess.
Okay, and what about processes for those of you that actually put your hands up if you're doing any level of remote work with your teams? You can just raise your hand physically if you want. So I'm guessing it's almost all of us, actually all of us, right? So which processes work for remote management? We've had nearly 3 years to practice this now. A bunch of things I think don't translate brilliantly from the office culture to being online. So what does work online and what doesn't work?
So in terms of processes, I'll introduce myself first. My name's Daniel. I work for a small American startup called Nestry Health and Performance loosely in the health tech space, and I'm a machine learning engineer and a tech lead there. Although being a startup, we're all doing lots of things. So for the past few months, I've been a project owner, a QA manager, a DevOps engineer, a backend engineer that works. And we're a remote first team. So most of the team is based in Orlando, but we have a few other people distributed across the States, and I'm based here in the UK. So I've never met any of my colleagues despite working with them for the best part of the year. So one thing that we do that I find useful, it's a little contrived, is every Monday morning, we have what we call a Mindset Monday meeting, and it's not like a stand-up. So it lasts half an hour and we don't talk about what we're going to be doing for the week. It's a kind of, each team member every week takes on the responsibility of picking a theme that somehow resonates with them personally, shares something about it and invites the other members of the team to talk about it. So it's some kind of stand-in for, going to lunch together or just kind of standing around the water cooler type moments. But I think it's something that I'm kind of painfully aware is missing in our team, that kind of face-to-face interaction and the cementing of kind of relationships. Even though we feel we work well together, there's just something about being in the same room as somebody, at the same time that is hard to replicate over Zoom. And this doesn't completely satisfy that, but it goes some way to doing it. And I'd be sort of curious if other people have other little rituals or things that they do to help with that kind of team cohesion, getting to know each other. And especially because we're all doing different roles, the other people that I'm sharing this meeting with, they wouldn't understand what I'm doing even if I told them. So it's not really so much about that as just kind of fostering a team mentality. We're all in this together kind of thing.
So Daniel, good points there. Certainly when I was consulting a couple of years ago with a accounting company, and I joined them on behalf of somebody else for a short engagement. They got me involved in their Who Wants to Be a Millionaire weekly game, which lasted for an hour, which was the stand-in for the coffee morning chat. And that was kind of bonkers because I was there for a short engagement. I was quite expensive to that company as I was seconded in via another organization, but they thought it was so important for team cohesion that they wanted me involved there. And so I got to bet the team's money, and then I helped us win and lose. And so that was a little bit scary, but actually, yeah, you got to know your team members a bit better, and it was all friendly and it was all virtual money. So that was quite a nice thing. And I've heard of not chat roulette, but coffee time roulette, as it was explained in the exec session before. So just random calls with people in your organization who you haven't met before. So you're enforced to go and have some random socialization, whether that's good or bad. It worked in that organization, but I think it's not an awful one. Anyone else got any observations? Lorna?
Yeah, we do a couple of versions of the coffee roulette as well. We've got like a whole company one where you can be usually paired up with somebody who you've never spoken to before by law of averages, and a like team one of our central team where it's like, the chat's a little bit. It's rarely on work. I guess you can talk about what you want, but they're rarely on work. But yeah, they're just like great times to sort of like get to know other people. Get to know how people, what's going on, and just kind of like, feel a bit closer to people when everyone's working remote. The thing I've noticed that's another good one that we do actually, thinking about like, so we use Slack, not Teams, and it sounds simple, but Slack calls, like one-on-one Slack calls where you can share your screen and like the other person can like highlight on the screen, is so much easier for doing like code reviews and pair programming and that kind of thing, rather than trying to just share a screen and be like, oh, in that cell, or no, go up a line, that kind of nonsense. Just like having the ability to draw on someone else's screen is like a very small but nice little game changer that we found works well. And I think the thing that's hard, which I don't have a great solution for yet, other than just get better at it, is like when realizing just how much you rely on like just like conversation that just happens. Like you walk past someone and be like, oh, you know, are we going to do this thing? And then, you know, like an idea happens, or okay, I'll, you know, write this up and send it to you tomorrow. Like those chats just don't happen as often. And so like writing stuff down, like written communication, I think is like even more important than everyone else is, you know, when it's a remote first team, and writing stuff down so you can look back at it like a week later and it's totally unambiguous about what you meant and what the process is and what we've all agreed to. Yeah, is a challenge, which we always, has tripped us up a few times, and I would love to know anyone's suggestions on how to do that better.
That came up in the executives chat again, the written first promotion of information, so that you've got a historical record and so that anyone can read it asynchronously. I'm aware we're pushing on with time, but I see Kevin and Barnaby, who haven't spoken yet, have both put their hands up. So you can have one comment each, and then we'll move on to the next topic. So Barnaby first, please.
Thanks. Yeah, so I work in a pretty small team in a sort of larger US corporate. A mix of the team, half sort of remote and half London based. One thing a former team member introduced, slightly light-hearted thing, was Friday jokes on the stand-up. So optional entirely, but you bring a joke, generally pretty poor quality. In fact, the bar tends to be lowered. You know, the aim is to lower it. So yeah, that's quite good fun, just to lighten things up. And the other thing, going back to Lorna's point, we use live share, VS Code live share quite a bit. That's really good for collaboration, better than just screen sharing, because you can move your own cursor around and you know, type on your own keyboard, sort of thing.
Excellent, thank you very much, Barnaby. And Kevin.
Yeah, hi, my name is Kevin. I work for a medical tech company, headquarters in the US. It's around probably 2,800 people there, but my team is like probably around like 7 people, 4 software engineers, 3 data scientists, including me. So some of the things we use to like communicate, obviously Slack. We do like weekly stand-ups, and I usually try to start, well, we don't have like stand-ups every day, but I try to always start Mondays with weekly commitments and Fridays like good achievements, and try to make as executive as possible, so the rest of the team like get in front of some of the things I have achieved during the week, or and basically if you need someone else for a new team to communicate, we just pin him through Slack. We do like Slack video calls, which is easier to do. We have Lucidchart actually, but I haven't exploited Lucidchart that much. So probably I will start using it. So we're part also of another big company called Dassault System, and they have a lot of internal system for communication. They barely want everyone to communicate through their tools, which have been developed by them in their servers. So we'll probably going to start doing that. But as a I guess collaboratively or motivational thing through colleagues, we have something called Kazoo Points, which is it's, well, you have like points, like a currency thing that you give to your colleagues when, I don't know, he just achieved something or a new release or a good presentation. You're like, okay, I'm gonna give you this 300 Kazoo points just to like motivate him or her, and they can actually transfer that and buy stuff with it. And also we have something called office work, which is like a kind of surveys based communication stuff where you just we basically have the whole team goals and company goals, and you can, like, if you want to be anonymous, you can communicate different stuff that maybe you're not agree, or maybe that you want to communicate without hurting anything, but you can do it through this. So I think this is also a good thing of communicating things that maybe you don't want to do it.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, so anonymous feedback tools are super useful, and I like the idea of giving points and then turning that into currency or cash and prizes. That's very cool. There's a couple of questions in the chat, if those of you that have got your eye on that, about Microsoft Whiteboard and stand-ups, which maybe you want to feedback on. We're going to move on to what works best: data scientists embedded individually, so one or two of you embedded in a team in some kind of cross-functional fashion, or a larger group of data scientists in like a data science center of excellence model, which reaches out into the business. I've worked in both. I think embedding in the business is generally most important to actually get your knowledge aligned with what's going on and delivering value. Anyone for that or against that way of working?
Hi, yeah. I think it is I agree that embedding is definitely better from my experience. Just that you need to have, essentially you've got, one product goal, one product vision, and data science is essentially a tool you can use to achieve that vision and to add value to customers. So being kind of in a team of cross-functional people who are delivering on that vision is key in my experience. And sometimes if you're part of a team as a center of excellence, you might get sort of siloed, or project, or your priorities might look quite different. However, in my part of the organization, we actually aren't doing that. But some of our projects are like that. So some of the products some of our data scientists in the way that we work are actually embedded almost like in a consulting fashion, I'd say, with other teams. And that might be because the data science component isn't, or the machine learning component isn't going to last forever. It might be like, we want to set up a personalization on one of our apps, say one of the Sky apps. And once you set that up, that's a large proportion of the low-hanging fruit, and there might be something better for that person to work on afterwards, a different product, for example. So I think it sort of depends, but I think, I think from experience, kind of, even if you are kind of separate as, an innovation or data science part of the business, it's really important to be as embedded as possible. I think with those other areas, with a clear kind of product focus. Yeah, so I'd agree, but I've done both.
Yeah, I've done both, and I've seen both work. But I do think one of the critical things is being embedded in the team in some shape or form, because otherwise you're a bunch of people who know statistics, which is brilliant. Only it turns out the business doesn't care about statistics, they care about the business. And then you're probably not talking the right language, but there's various ways to achieve that. Anders.
Hit the button. Yeah, I mean, we don't treat data scientists any other than we do UX or graphic designers or anything like that. It's you get embedded into the business because that's how you get to know the business, and the business is what brings value. So we had the guild system to handle sort of the knowledge exchange. So basically, weekly, monthly meetups with all the data scientists, everyone working with ML to get caught up on what was going on in the business. but day-to-day, you deliver value close to the business, because that's the only way that you can have short iterations and get stuff to customers. So I completely agree with Sophia that I've seen it mainly work best in that model.
I just have a follow-up question for you, Andres. Yeah. What's your, how are the data scientists feeling about this? Are they happy about this structure, or is it always something you need to sell?
Well, so it comes back to my original question, right? Is if you hire data scientists, you think that they will be spending a lot of time sitting in a room building models, then they're going to have a bad time. So we have tried various things to filter in the recruitment process. Some things like Amrik was mentioning. We should probably do a bit more of that. But it hasn't actually been a problem for my teams, in the sense that they could actually see value being created. But we have had some grumbling on the side because we inherited a few members from previously.
I think there's been a bit of a setup problem there with the data science sexiest job of the 21st century. Therefore, you are a little godlike creature and you'll be treated as such. And it turns out, no, you're just another person in the organization who is replaceable and hopefully does something useful. And so, yeah, hiring the right team or changing your team to have the right competition, I guess, is incredibly important there. We're going to have two more points. So Kevin and then Nick. Kevin first.
Yeah, I think I agree also with embedding the team. I think we at the company, yeah, we have the person that notes about statistical things regarding how to measure different variables. So we work with pharmaceuticals and doing clinical trials, and those are skills that probably a data scientist that hasn't worked really deeply in clinical trial tests won't have. Those are skills that someone like that won't have. So I guess we're trying to build the skills each other for all of us by having this sort of mentoring, partner mentoring thing that you can actually, if you want to learn a skill that you observe in someone, you can do some sort of partner mentoring to pull up whoever is interested in learning some of your skills. So that's a good thing. Yeah, that's a comment I wanted to make.
That's nice. Thank you very much. And Nick.
So thanks. So yeah, since when I joined M&S just over 18 months ago, I think I was leading a kind of a siloed functional data science team, which I definitely would not recommend working on. The team was very, very detached from use cases. There's a real risk of building things that wouldn't be used, and long delays in terms of actually building things that were needed, but aligning planning and priorities with customer experience type teams was difficult. I moved after a lot of political issues. I moved towards embedded models, but I found with a lot of the feedback from the team that they felt very isolated, very siloed in teams. There wasn't a lot of collaboration. There wasn't a lot of knowledge sharing. Actually, people were not that happy. Then a way. So something I've experimented with more recently is a hybrid model. So for example, I have one team that is structured more like a platform team. So I have data scientists working with kind of back-end engineers who partner with different front-end teams, often share goals with the front-end teams, and may work on specific use cases for, say, a quarter at a time. Like for me, that model has been most successful in terms of the outcomes we've delivered, but also in terms of the well-being and the happiness of that team. So it seems to be really positive, and that's something I'm looking to. I don't know if that's just a fluke in that area. It's something I'm looking to trial in a different area in the coming weeks. But yeah, that certainly something that I've had positive results with so far.
Okay, yeah, and I think it comes down to building the right team that solves whatever the job is at hand, be it user interaction design or front-end development or whatever it is, as long as you've got people who can actually achieve something and ship something and they can get that job done, I would imagine generally everyone's going to feel happier over that versus having the best model down to 9 decimal places, which you can't ship and nobody cares about, and everyone knows you're a cost, not a value to the organization. Right, we're going to move on to the question of, sorry, thank you, Nick. Move on to the question of best practices for recruiting data people. What common mistakes should I avoid? Who's been recruiting recently? Who's enjoyed the recruitment process? Has no one been recruiting? I'm certainly curious to, I mean, there was the point earlier about hiring for people who are motivated by software engineering versus people who are domain specialists. Is there a tension in the market? Too many people focused on being a domain specialist on their particular PyTorch or Vision or whatever, versus people who are a bit more rounded and are happy to take on multiple roles in a team to get the job done?
So I don't know if it was just in Denmark, but there was definitely a wave of bootcamp graduate data scientists who'd done sort of Coursera and your courses saying, I'm now a data scientist. And then they come into the real world and then are a bit disappointed. But for us, it hasn't been hard to weed out that wave, so it hasn't been that much of an issue for us. It was more noise in our CVs, I guess.
Certainly in London, we had a lot of people coming out of boot camps, and yeah, they wanted to do all the math, but didn't know how to query SQL, and then didn't know how to talk to a customer or define what a project might look like or what an outcome might be. And yeah, and also generally they couldn't do the math very well either, and so that was not easy for a lot of companies. Imric.
For us, we had a senior position open for more than 6 months, I think, because yeah, I mean, it was really hard to find the right candidate, and we didn't want to compromise. It felt, yeah. And looking back, so we made an offer with one person who yeah, ticked most of the box. We had a bit of a compromise because of what we took. So I'm MLeng, so I'm more on the software end, and I was really keen to get someone that is strong on that end, even though that person did not have like a full scale experience on architecture. That person is very strong on the software. Versus the actual data science, but from the conversation we had before, like I felt that it would be easier to have someone with that background in order to deliver value to the business. So yeah, I guess so the bottom line is we got loads of people. Very few are actually going through our process, and I don't think we have a very hard process. Like we do live coding and live refactoring. Highly recommend that. I think, you know, I've seen like quite a few people with like very impressive CV and who are not able to actually manipulate Panda very well. And yeah, so just something to be aware of, I guess.
How did you find the best people in that instance? Which channels did you find useful?
So it's very difficult because of the nature of our company. We have to work with specific agencies. So finding the best people is just a matter of waiting for them. Just unfortunately, I don't have a magic recipe. We just look for CV and so we do have a test up front to filter out. So we have like an online test to filter out like a first time, and then like yeah, a couple of interviews. And unfortunately, yeah, no magic recipe here.
Yeah, Raphael. Thank you, Imric.
Yeah, so I had a question, maybe if you had some experience hiring developers to support the data scientists in this vertical that's often missing, because we're considering to hire somebody from the 42 school. So it's a very focused projects and dev. So people coming out of there should have a very good software development profile, but basically no, it's not at all oriented data. So I don't know if any of you had that kind of profile coming in and how that worked out.
What is the school name?
42.
42 school. I don't 42. Know that.
I think it's a very good question, to be honest, because so I'm at a stage. Sorry, I'm jumping in because this is a question I asked myself. I was like, what is more valuable, to get someone that is very strong in data science and not at all in software engineering, or someone that is good in software engineering and train them in data science? And I'm leaning towards the latest, i.e., software engineering that you train. Just they will need, especially at first, quite a bit of mentoring. That's there is no secret. But I feel that especially for a smaller, if you want a smaller loop, it feels like more interesting. Yeah, I think.
The situation we have now is that we can't really hire a lot, and our team is very strong in data science, algorithm, statistics, but not putting things into production and etc. So it was. I'm seeing this as a resource that can support our existing teams, our existing projects on these skills that are kind of missing.
There is a risk. If you want, we can take that offline, but there is a big risk because you need somebody who knows how to do MLOps. If you have people that are very strong in maths and stats, but I've never put things in production, you need someone who has experience. Otherwise, they are like a pitfall that person won't know.
I can chip in with. In Copenhagen, we have a pretty strong geo physics universities, and we found that those graduates, they're pretty good at balancing it because they have to know a lot of math, but they also have to manage like HPC clusters, and they get those slots to run their code on. So they have to be pretty structured, and we've had some good luck with those.
Yeah, thanks.
How often do you make sure you've got someone who's got PM experience on a team? So not just data scientists and the software engineers and people who bridge those, but someone who orchestrates a team, make sure there's alignment with the organization, manages whatever needs managing. How important is that across your teams? Imric, you're screwing your face up.
Yeah, but I feel that I've been talking too much, so I want to give the opportunity. I'm smiling. I'm smiling because it's been a very long discussion and a back and forth of like. So I'm not sure if you're talking about product or project or both, but we will be. We have an open position. I mean, very soon for a product person, senior product person, ex-data scientist, but like who move into product. We are not all aligned on exactly what that person is, so it's going to take some months to get that. But keen to hear anyone, like what people have to say in that respect, success stories, and
Well, Marcia, can I? No, I've mispronounced your name again. I know. I'm sorry. Tell me how to pronounce your name. And do you have an opinion on this because you do client-facing work, which has to be managed?
Yes, of course. Yeah, it's Marisha. It's
Marisha.
So yeah, in our organization, keep in mind, I started there last week, so I don't have that much experience to tell from yet. But in our organizations, we have analytics translators. So analytics translators are people who do have the background and the necessary knowledge. They probably worked as a data scientist for a long time, but their role is literally to make sure that they keep in contact with all the stakeholders, they do all the talking, and they also manage what everyone works on. So we have both analytics translators and a lead data scientist. The lead data scientist focuses more on the how and leading the data scientists in their work. And the analytics translator focuses more on what does everyone work on and what should they be working on, what will provide the most value for the business. And I think the collaboration, especially because our analytics translators are all former data scientists, I feel like that collaboration with the team works really well for us.
Great. And Sophia, I think you might be the last point.
Yeah. So the way we work in Scrum within our part of the organization, and in Scrum you necessarily have a product owner. And I think for us, it works really well. I think being a product owner, product manager is probably the hardest job in the whole company, because essentially you make or break the value. It's down to your vision of the product that you're delivering on, and you'll rein in the expertise from marketing and the business strategy and data science and tech experts to understand feasibility, viability, all of that. So yeah, I think it is really important to have product owners, because when you don't, things start to get quite confusing, and you have people inevitably, whether that's developers or data scientists, filling in those gaps. Doesn't mean that senior data scientists aren't important, and data science expertise aren't important in advising the product owner. But I think you do need like accountability of the product vision, because it isn't a committee at the end of the day. It has to be made. The decisions have to be made, and you need to be able to like inform that person. So yeah, I'd say that's the way we work. I think it's a really important role.
Thank you very much. Yes, so I agree that product ownership role is incredibly important. I've sat alongside the product owner where they're trying to design a new thing for the client, and then I've asked some questions about volumes and numbers of people and the importance of results and how do we know it is or isn't working. And they said, but we need to make sure we've got the graphs going in the right direction. Let me show you the mock-ups. So, the mock-ups are lovely, but why would we trust that we can actually generate these hockey stick up into the right graphs? Well, we'll design that bit later. And you think, are you asking the right questions? Do you know what the client needs? Do you know what the statistics might support? And how do I help you ask the right questions here? Because I think maybe you're not. And I think that's another underappreciated component of a successful data science team, is having the people who can ask the right questions to help flush out what the right product might be. Now, Dan, I'm afraid we need to wrap up now because we're on the top of the hour. Sorry about that. If you want to put a final comment into the chat, you're super welcome to, and I'll keep that open for a minute if you do. And so thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I'm going to summarize these notes for my newsletter, which is going to be next week, so about 10 days away. And if you're not on my newsletter, remind me and just send me an email, and I'll just send you a link to that when it's up there. So I'm going to summarize the notes that came out of this. There's a really interesting selection of topics. I'll link to this recording in the newsletter there as well. So if you'd like a copy of that and you're not on my newsletter, just drop me a mail. Otherwise, it's notanumber.email for the newsletter. I carry jobs on there. If any of you are hiring and you haven't used the newsletter before, you're welcome to reach out there. 1,500 people, a lot of more intermediate, senior people, data science and data engineering. So you're welcome. You just have a free ad as one of my participants. That'll be great. And I have the next session in a month's time, August the 8th, same time on a Monday, backlogs, de-risking and estimation, which I think will be a different gnarly question. How do we find the right projects to work on in a team? How do you estimate them, risks and opportunities? How do you value them? How do you set them up for success when you know almost nothing about them and the chance of failure is really high? And that's another underestimated, underappreciated difficulty in our domain. So I'd love for you to come and join for that one if you'd like. If you're not on the invite already, then drop me an email and I'll add you onto that. Thank you very much for attending, and I'll just send out an email to everyone when I put that newsletter out, linking to it, just so that you've all got a copy of that. So actually you haven't got to do any action there. Great. Thank you very much. Any follow-up questions you've got, send me a message and I will endeavor to help. And Imeric, you just said happy to have a follow-up chat on the MLX comments to Raphael. So Raphael, you can follow up there. And thank you very much for attending, everyone. And I hope to see you on the next call. Thank you. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks to meet you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.